Welcome to Briefings on Global Affairs and Geopolitics. This hour in focus. Lula welcomes back banned Venezuelan leader Maduro. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro, left, and his Brazilian counterpart Luiz Inacio Lula da Silva in Brasíliaand. Why is this happening right now? A fellow leftist, Luiz Inacio Lula da Silva, the country's newly elected president, greeted Maduro upon his arrival in Brazil ahead of a gathering of Latin American leaders in Brasilia. Lula stated that the most significant aspect of Maduro's visit was the fact that it marked the beginning of Maduro's return to Venezuela. Mr. Maduro mentioned the beginning of a new era in the context of bilateral relations. Lula advocated for combating the region's widespread poverty. The legitimacy of Mr. Maduro, who is referred to as a dictator by his detractors, has been called into question by a number of countries. Lula added that his own comeback had arrived 5 months earlier when he was greeting his guest in the Brazilian capital on Monday. He was alluding to the period when he once again seized power after defeating Mr. Bolsonaro in close presidential elections. Mr. Maduro stated that Venezuela was available for Brazilian investors and emphasized that the two nations must be united, beginning now and forever. Lula took advantage of the visit to criticize sanctions imposed by the United States against Venezuela. He stated that sanctions were unwarranted and that there was a constructed narrative of authoritarianism about Venezuela. President Maduro last visited Brazil in 2015. It was quite unlikely that Jair Bolsonaro would issue an invitation to the socialist Venezuelan leader because of their ideological differences. Despite this, Lula used to have cordial relationships with both Nicolás Maduro and Hugo Chávez, who served as Maduro's political mentor before Chávez passed away. Lula commented on the extremely exaggerated sanctions that the United States has imposed on Venezuela and stated that it was illogical that the United States would impose 900 sanctions because they don't get along. This is a sign that the relationship is likely to continue to be strong. He pushed his South American ally to construct a fresh narrative about authoritarianism and said that an unfair and constructed one had been established around the status of democracy in Venezuela. He was referring to the narrative that has been established around the state of democracy in Venezuela. The words made by Lula have been pounced upon by his detractors, who claim that he is complicit in the Maduro administration's alleged breaches of human rights and absence of free and fair elections, and they point to Lula's comments as evidence. Mr. Maduro took use of the occasion presented by the visit to reiterate his demand that the U.S. sanctions be repealed. He also stated that he will call on the other countries in South America to reject the penalties as a regional bloc. Included in this group are Argentina, Bolivia, and Colombia in addition to Brazil, all of which now have left-leaning presidents at the helm of their respective nations, and may therefore lend their support to such a viewpoint. On the other hand, it is not entirely obvious whether or not such a demand would result in a material change in the approach that the Biden administration takes toward Venezuela. Since his election in 2013, Nicolás Maduro has taken an increasingly authoritarian stance in Venezuela. After a contentious election in 2019, the United States recognized Juan Guaido, the leader of the opposition, as the interim president of Venezuela, in response to his administration's assault on opposition activists, which ultimately led to the imposition of sanctions against his government by the United States. In December of 2018, Venezuela's National Assembly, which is controlled by the opposition, voted to end its own parallel administration and oust Mr. Guaido. Although he was recognized by many Western countries, including the United States, he was not successful in deposing the president who supported the left. It was clear from the vote that a significant number of opposition politicians in Venezuela had lost faith in Mr. Guaido. In an effort to present a unified face in front of the elections that are due to take place in 2024, The parliament also resolved to form a commission to administer the nation's overseas assets. Since 2015, the prolonged political and humanitarian catastrophe that has gripped Venezuela has caused approximately 7 million people to abandon the nation. Since many years ago, Venezuela has been locked in a downward spiral, which has been further fueled by growing political dissatisfaction, skyrocketing hyperinflation, power cuts, and shortages of food and medication. That's where we wrap things up for the time being. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.